to welcome you to another edition of our Anchored in the Word morning reflection. We are back in Ecclesiastes chapter 9 today, so if you have a Bible, I'd like to invite you to take it, and let's look together at Ecclesiastes 9, verses 4 to 9. Ecclesiastes 9, verses 4 through 9. For to him that is joined to all the living there is hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward for the memory of them that is forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished, neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun. Go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, drink thy wine with a merry heart, for God now accepteth thy works. Let thy garments be always white, let thy head lack no ointment. Live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of the life of thy vanity, which he hath given to thee under the sun, all the days of thy vanity. That is thy portion in this life, and in thy labor which thou takest up under the sun. When we come to this passage of Scripture, what we're seeing is kind of an application of what we discussed yesterday. And if you remember yesterday, we emphasized that when a person is living, they have hope. And so even though life is challenging, and sometimes we go through tremendous heartache and difficulties in life, we still realize that if we're alive, we have the blessing of a gift from God, and we have opportunities that we can still seize. And so remember, in the book of Ecclesiastes, really Solomon has struck a pretty negative tone overall. He hasn't overlooked the challenges and the difficulties of life. And so when we come to this passage and we recognize that he's going to emphasize enjoying what we have, we need to realize that he's making that emphasis in light of the fact that he knows for a fact there is a lot of hardship in life. He sees a lot of complicated situations that he can't fully make sense of. Yet in light of that, he still believes that life should be enjoyed, and it can be enjoyed. And that's the way he's going to counsel each of us. So with that in mind, let's look at just a simple summary statement and then dig into a couple of reminders that Solomon gives in this passage, and then some counsels or some encouragements, some applications to live wisely in light of these truths. Here's a summary statement. Learn to enjoy the life that God has given you because it's a gift. Let me say that again. Learn to enjoy the life that God has given you because it's a gift. Now, he's not suggesting that this life is going to be perfect. He's not suggesting that everything that we experience in this life is easy or it's fun or it doesn't lack some hardship or difficulty. But what he is going to say is that the good that we enjoy is clearly, unquestionably from God's hand. In fact, the word that he uses is the word portion. And when we think of a portion, think about when your kids are around the table and mom gives the food out or dad gives the food out. We say, that's what we've given you. That's your portion. And your child goes, thank you. At least we hope that's what they say. No, they go, oh, that's too much, or that's too little, or I don't like this. We say, that's what you've been given. Enjoy what you have. Eat it. You need it to strengthen your body. The idea is that God gives us a portion in life. And many times we don't look at life that way. We have this attitude of entitlement toward what we expect to have from God. But this text is going to remind us that what we have that's good is a gift. It's not deserved. It's by God's grace and kindness that he's given us those things. And so there's a certain way that we need to relate to God's good gift, the things that we enjoy in this life. The first reminder that he gives us is that life itself is a gift. In verse 4, he says, to him that is joined to all the living, there's hope. A living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, we talked about this yesterday, but it really does kind of hinge into what we're discussing today. He says, you look at a dog, and in the ancient world, a dog was the lowest of the creatures. That was one of the animals that ran around on the street, and basically it ate trash on the street. And when you think about a lion, especially in the ancient world, when someone thought of someone who was a king, had power and strength and fearsome, they thought of the lion as the animal that represented or best pictured the position of a king and royalty. He says this powerful creature, the lion, if it's dead, is not in a better place than the dog who's alive. And his point is that life's a gift. Life is something that we should treasure. Life is something that we should see as valuable. And so he gives that little parable to help us to recognize that. A second reminder that he gives us is that life under the sun has an end point. Verses 5 and 6, he says, The living now know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, their hatred, their envy is now perished, neither have they any more a portion forever and in anything that is done under the sun. Now he's not suggesting that we cease to exist when we die. Solomon's not commenting on the eternal state of people. We obviously know that the Bible's very clear that there's a heaven and there's a hell, and there's an eternity in God's presence or eternity separated from God. There's an eternal kingdom, and it's very real, and it's a very vibrant thing. And the Bible has a lot to say about that. But in the context that Solomon is looking at, he's looking at simply life under the sun. He's saying, listen, there comes a day when the things that you experience, the good and the bad, the blessings that you've been given and the challenges that you faced, it's all going to come to an end. And when you go into eternity, people forget you. You know, how many people, great people in history, who were used mightily to do huge things, people don't even know their names. How many people were terribly infamous and did evil things, and we don't even know their name? The idea is that once we're gone, people forget us. And there's no more to accomplish on this side of the grave. And so he's simply reminding us that, look, not only is life a gift, but life is something that is going to be temporary. The enjoyment of the experience of this life isn't going to last forever. So then the question is, if those are the two things that Solomon reminds us of, then how does he want us to respond to that? What is his counsel? What is the wisdom that he imparts to us in light of those two very simple yet important facts? Well, the first counsel he gives is that we need to learn to enjoy our daily provision. He's saying the things that God has given you to sustain your body, you need to enjoy those things. Here's how he puts it in verse 7. He says, "Go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, drink thy wine with a merry heart." Now, when he talks about bread and wine, he's emphasizing the fact that this is your daily sustenance, the things that God has given you to take care of you. You might call it your daily bread. When we think about the Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, "Give us this day our daily bread." He's basically saying you should be content and you should enjoy your daily provision, what God has provided by the fruit of your labors to sustain your body. Enjoy those things. He gives a second counsel. He says, realize that God gives good things to be enjoyed. In verse 7, he says, "God now accepteth thy works." Now, this is not a statement about how a person gets saved, okay? He talks about God accepting our works. He's not suggesting that the way that we're justified before God and the way that we're forgiven and cleansed is through presenting to God our good deeds. And he says, well, I accept those things, and so now I forgive you. That's not in the context at all. He's not talking about how we're reconciled to God here. He's simply talking about the fact that when we enjoy the things that God gives us, that is an acceptable thing to God. That's something that actually delights God. In other words, God gives us good things because he wants us to enjoy them. And we see this in a couple of texts in the New Testament. In James 1:17, he says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift comes from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning." In other words, James says, if you're enjoying good things in this world, you're enjoying them as gifts from God. I'm reminded in the book of Matthew where Jesus says we need to be like our Father in heaven, who causes his rain to fall on the just and the unjust. And the idea is that God takes care of people and he blesses people who don't even know him, who are not acknowledging him, who don't recognize his authority. In 1 Timothy 6:17, he says, "Charge them that are rich in this world to not be high-minded or to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God." And I think this next statement is so very important. He says, "Who gives us richly all things to enjoy." Well, the idea is that we need to realize that when we have good things in our life, these are gifts from God, and it's totally acceptable, it's totally appropriate to actually enjoy those things. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the temporal blessings that God gives us in this world. In fact, it wouldn't make sense for us to not enjoy those things. But he just makes it very simple here. It's acceptable to God when we do that. The third is this: take care of what you have. In verse 8, he talks about two aspects of us taking care of what we have. He talks about what we wear, and he talks about the body that God's given us. He says in verse 8, let thy garments be always white, and let thy head lack no ointment. Now basically he's saying, take care of the clothes that God gives you, and take care of your body. When he says, let your garments always be white, he's saying, make sure that your clothes are clean, make sure that they're pressed, make sure that you are taking care of those things that God has provided to clothe you. When he says, let your head lack no ointment, he's saying, take care of your body. In other words, people should actually care about the things that they wear. They should actually care about the health of their body, exercising, eating right, those kinds of things. There's nothing wrong with us doing that. In fact, it's part of our portion. It's part of our responsibility in this life to actually take good care of what God has given to us. Enjoying what he provides, taking care of what he gives. Then he gives a fourth counsel. This is really kind of the final counsel of this section. He says, enjoy your spouse. In verse 9, he says, live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of thy life of thy vanity, which he hath given thee under the sun, all the days of thy vanity, for that is thy portion in this life, and thy labor which thou takest under the sun. The fourth thing he says is enjoy the person that God gave you to marry. Enjoy your husband, ladies. Enjoy your wife, men. Be thankful for the spouse that God has given you. The truth is that God created marriage for our good and for our enjoyment. God created marriage because he wanted to bless us. And he wants us to actually go through this life enjoying that relationship. And not just our spouse, but really our family, our children, if God gives us children. The reality is this is our portion. So what Solomon's basically saying is enjoy the food that God gives you to sustain you. Take care of the things that God gives you to clothe you. Take care of the body that God's given you. And enjoy your family. Enjoy your spouse. Enjoy those whom God has put around you. What is the point of this whole section? Well, the whole point of the section is be content with what God gives you. But not just content. Rejoice in it. Enjoy it. Delight in these things as good gifts from the hands of a wonderful, wonderful God who cares about us. And so in 1 Timothy 6:7, this is how Paul kind of relates the exact same concept. He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into this world. It is certain we can carry nothing out. Having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, into many foolish and hurtful lusts. In other words, Paul is saying the exact same thing. Enjoy what God gives you. Be content with it. Don't be frustrated. And I want to remind you that when Solomon writes these words, he's writing these words with a full understanding that life is hard, that life is complicated, that life is full of challenges. There are some situations that we can't make sense of. There are times that we look at things in life and we go, I don't understand that. I don't even know if that's right. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem just. We can perceive certain things in life that way. Solomon's expressed this over and over and over again. Yet in the midst of that, he says, listen, there are many blessings associated with living on this side of eternity. Though it's a flawed world, though it's a vain and empty world, though it's not the only thing we should live for, it still has value and it still is important to God. And so he says, enjoy what you have. I want to ask you this morning, are you enjoying what you have? Are you content with what God's given you? Are you actually enjoying his provision? Are you taking care of the things that he's entrusted to you? Are you rejoicing in the family that God has given you? Are you investing and loving your spouse the way that you're supposed to? The truth is that God has given us these things as our portion in this life. And those are things we shouldn't take for granted of. The reality is, even if we've had a hard life, we still have life. And we've still been blessed by God in many ways. And there are blessings that we can recount to ourselves, and we should express to God the gratitude that is appropriate for those things that he's given us. Always remember that little proverb, a living dog is better than a dead lion. And that's the point that he's making. If you're alive, you have blessings that God has given to you. So enjoy those things. If this has been a challenge to you, I hope that you'll share that. I hope that this has been a blessing to you as I thought about these things this morning. Encourage me. Let's bow together for a word of prayer. Our Father, thank you for the opportunity to study a very practical passage. Help us to live fully in the light of these truths. Help us to cherish the good things that you've given us as blessings from your hand. Help us not to feel entitled to these things. Help us to be content with them, but to rejoice in what you've given us and to rejoice in them as from you. I pray that we'd have a proper perspective as we think about this life. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. Well, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And Lord willing, tomorrow we will continue our study in Ecclesiastes. Have a great day. Bye now.